Hello, welcome to Dennis's Favorite Trees. Um, the title there has for the landscape too. Question mark. I will tell you now, some of these are probably not what you would want to put in your landscape, but some of these are my trees that I really like. So I put them in the video anyway. First off, choosing the right tree. You want to measure your space to make sure that you are going to plant a tree that will not outgrow the space. That's very important. A lot of times we plant trees in locations that are going to outgrow that spot and it's just going to not look good. And it's also maybe might even be hanging over the road or over the house or something. It's just not a safe place for that particular species. Also, you want to go ahead and do a soil test. That way we'll know what your pH is. That's probably more of a problem with some of the trees than maybe what even the nutrients are in your soil. But we do want to know the nutrients as well. But if your pH is wrong, some species just will not thrive. Also, you want to determine your exposure. Is it full sun? Is it part sun? Is it shade? Those are very important aspects as well. If it's more shady, you're going to have to pick more of an understory tree, maybe not something that, a large maple tree or something would not be a good tree for that location. Also, think about safety, which I just mentioned, is if it's going to get too big, it's going to hang over the house, is it going to hang over the road? What happens if it gets so large and it needs to be cut down? Is it going to hit wires? Those are all things to think about. If that tree, something happened to that tree, where is it going to land? Also, what do you want from the tree? Do you want fall color? Do you want blooms in the spring? Do you want fruit? Any of those things, or all of those things, maybe something that you want in the tree that you pick. Also, your species and cultivar selections are very important because we do have insect and disease problems in a lot of our trees. That's something we want to make sure that we pick those that we can limit what we are going to need as in care for that tree. You're definitely not going to pick a cultivar that has a lot of insect or disease problems, just because you're just not going to be able to take care of that tree. Also, be careful with sentimentality. This is what I'm saying when I started this video. There's some trees on here that probably are not great trees for most people, but I like them because I have some sentimentality with them because of growing up and the people in my family that like those trees a lot. So I included these in here. So just keep that in mind. I will let you know some of these that you probably won't want to put in your landscape. Bacterial leaf scorch is, I wouldn't say a new disease, but a relatively new disease that has hit a lot of our landscape trees, especially. It's a very big disease for especially pin oaks. And in landscapes, it's not as big a problem in nature necessarily as it is in our landscapes. It is a bacteria that is vectored by a leafhopper, and it actually, over time, kills the tree because it blocks the vascular flow of water and nutrients in the tree, and the tree will die from the top down. And it may take 10 to 15 years for this to kill a large pin oak, or even longer. But if you look at the chart here, this is the species that have not yet been affected by bacterial leaf scorch that we know of. I should put that in there. But you can look down through there and you can see that some of these, a few of these are probably decent or are decent trees for the landscape, such as the black gum, we'll talk about later, the beeches, European beech, Kentucky coffee tree, Katsura, magnolias. Only the black maple has not had bacterial leaf scorch. So what does that tell you? That probably means that we just haven't found it yet, because if the sugar and the red and all the other maples have had a bacterial leaf scorch at some point, then probably chances are the black maple did too. Even all the way down here to the tulip tree, which is a very popular landscape tree, but it's a rather large tree. So the first group of maple trees that I really like is the red maples. They do prefer a slightly acidic soil. That's why we want you to do your soil test where we know your pH, and will grow fastest and be the healthiest tree it can be in a moist soil, not wet but moist. It can actually probably take a little bit of wet as well. But there on the top left there, that's Red Sunset. It's a really late coloring maple, but it's a beautiful solid red color. It will color that color every year. It is selected to be that. It was selected because of that color. It grows about 45 to 50 feet tall, and about 35 to 49 feet wide. And then on the right there, we have October Glory. It grows about 40 to 50 feet tall and about 25 feet wide. There's a typo there, 25 to 25 feet wide, but you get the gist of it there. And it's a nice orange fall color. It's more of a what you would think more of a sugar maple look to it, but it's also a gorgeous red maple selection. There's a lot of different new red maple selections on the market now. Most of them are really nice plants. Another maple that most of us really love, and me included, is the sugar maples. The sugar maple actually is classified as the best shade tree, meaning that it gives you the densest, darkest shade of any tree out there. Problem is that dense shade comes a problem of having grass grow into the tree, but a little limbing up can help that out a little bit. These do prefer a moist soil as well. It's not as particular as the red maple in regards to pH, so it doesn't necessarily have to have an acidic pH. Slightly acidic, which is what our natural pH usually is fine for this tree, but it doesn't want a little lower pH like the red maples would. There on the top left is Bonfire. It grows about 40 to 50 feet tall and wide, which is a nice big tree, or no, I wouldn't say a huge tree, but a nice sized tree. And then there on the left is Fall Fiesta. You can see that fall color there's just gorgeous on it. Now it is a huge tree. It's 60 to 70 feet tall and 30 to 45 feet wide. So it will grow into an enormous tree if given the right location and the time to get there. And then on the right, I just want to throw some of these new cultivars out there. This is is columnar, and it is one of those selections that doesn't get real wide, so it's for a space that maybe you don't have enough room for a full size sugar maple, but you can get one of these selections here. This is columnar. It'll go 30 feet tall, but only gets 10 feet wide. So it's a narrow tree, but it is good for a small space. 30 feet still a pretty tall tree, but it's not going to be something that's going to outgrow a location like one of these larger maples would. Next, we have paper bark maple, and these maples are grown mostly for their cinnamon bark, the cinnamon colored bark that exfoliates off. This one prefers sun to partial shade with moist, well-drained soil. Definitely, I think the partial shade and the moist, well-drained soil is a must for these trees, especially to get them off to a good start. The top left there, you can see the bark there, and it's got a little frost on it, but that is a fireburst. It grows about 25 feet tall and about 18 feet wide. And there in the middle, that's gingerbread. And I wanted to show you that's the fall color for most of these paper bark maples. It grows about 30 feet tall and 20 feet wide. And then over on the right there, that's a new selection as well. That's cinnamon flake, and you can see the bark kind of exfoliates in smaller pieces in rows, and just gives you a different look than what the bark does there on Fireburst. But it's a very nice tree, and it grows about 20 to 30 feet tall and about 15 to 20 feet wide. One thing about the paper bark maples are they are pretty slow growing. So, if you have a spot that 25 feet might be the absolute maximum that you'd want that tree to grow, just know that they're fairly low growing. It's going to be a long time before that tree gets there. And it takes these a little bit of time to really get started. Here we have the red buckeye. It's probably the only buckeye you'll ever hear me say that I would plant and would consider it a really nice landscape plant. This one prefers full sun to partial shade, moist to slightly acidic soil. It is adaptable to soil too. It's not as important pH and things as it is for some other plants. This one grows about 10 to 20 feet in height and about 20 feet wide or more. The 20 feet wide or more is not because the actual little tree itself grows that wide, because it is because if left to its own devices, it will actually kind of make a little colony and will have some root suckers. You can train it into just a small tree form if you'd like, or you can let those root suckers grow and you can let it form its little thicket that it would like to. A lot of times you'll see it as a single stemmed plant in some gardens, like in the bottom picture here, and they keep the suckers out and they trim it up a little bit just to make a small tree. The great thing about this buckeye is the red flowers in the spring, and you can see those long spikes of red flowers there, and the hummingbirds absolutely go crazy for this tree when it's in flower. Here we have mimosa. Now, this is one of those that most of you would say you're crazy, but it's not necessarily going to be the tree for everyone. It is a weedy species. I'll put that out first and foremost. It also has some issues with some diseases and insects. The Mimosa webworm is one that causes some leaf feeding and some webs in it, and then it is susceptible to verticillium wilt. It's possible that it could get that and would kill the tree down to the ground. But it is one of those trees that I have sentimental value with this tree. My grandmother loved it, and it does have some good attributes. So I included it in this PowerPoint. It is tolerant to most soils and sites. It does prefer a moist, well-drained soil. You'll get your largest tree out of that site. Also, you can see there it flowers in the summer. Another one of those that hummingbirds love when it's in flower, and it smells really nice when it's in flower as well. But again, it does produce seeds and can become weedy in our environment here. Most of them grow 20 to 35 feet tall and wide. Again, some of them are susceptible to fusarium or verticillium wilts. I don't know that I've ever seen maybe one or two trees in my lifetime have that out of the literally thousands that I've seen. But it is possible, so just know that that's out there. There are a couple cultivars on the market, believe it or not. We have Flame there, the bottom left. It grows 35 feet tall and about 40 feet wide. It does have a deep rose-colored flower there, which is a little darker rose color than the actual straight cultivar is. And then we have Summer Chocolate, which is a newer selection there on the right. It's a little smaller, it only gets about 20 feet tall and about 15 feet wide, but it does have that burgundy purple foliage, which is a good contrast next to those light pink flowers. It also is said that the Summer Chocolate is actually resistant to the fusarium wilt. So if anyone wants to plant a mimosa, just know don't plant it close to the house because it will fill your gutters with litter. Don't plant somewhere where the seeds are going to get out and it's just going to be a problem for your neighbors pulling up seedlings. It is a weedy tree, but it's nothing like some of the other weedy species of trees that we have out that's gotten away from us. Serviceberry is another nice little native tree. This prefers full sun to part sun, moist soil, and it's tolerant of many soil types. So it's a great little tree. It's really nice little tree for urban areas, especially. You can see in the pictures there. The wild varieties generally grow about 15 to 25 feet tall and wide. The fruit are edible, so if you want something with fruit on it and you want to, maybe have a tree in the yard that's has landscape value and some fruit, this is a good one for you. I will say though, where they've planted some of these, it's probably not great because they're hanging over a sidewalk, and we know what that fruit's going to do when it falls. Also, the first top left there, it's a nice little tree there. It's pretty much a standard serviceberry there. That's Autumn Brilliance. It's probably the most common variety that you'll be able to probably find on the market. It grows 25 feet tall and wide at maturity. And then we have Cumulus there on the right. It grows about 20 feet tall and wide, so it's a pretty small tree. The great thing is if you have ornamental pears that have gotten out in the wild, they're taking over everything. Well, if you like that flower look, why not plant a Cumulus serviceberry there? You can see you get that same type of flowering, but as a native tree, you don't have to worry about it becoming invasive like the ornamental pear has. Here we have river birch. It does prefer moist to wet locations, especially in nature. It does pretty well in our landscapes as well. There are some good cultivars of these out there. Also, some of these have been planted in the wrong locations, especially in landscapes. You can buy these in clumping form, or you can buy them single trunk. Usually, in the landscape industry, they'll put 2 or 3 trees together because you'll get more bark that way, and that's usually what we're growing these for. You can see that pretty exfoliating bark there on the right. Also, the river birch is actually resistant to the birch borer. The white birch from up north are not resistant to it. So that's why that's not a good selection for us. In the wild, some of these can grow 40 to 90 feet tall and 60 feet wide. And you can see as far as the straight selection goes, you probably wouldn't want to put that too close to the house because of that size. And you need to make sure that you know that going in. If a landscaper is putting in a river birch, definitely ask what cultivar it is because they have planted a lot of these way too close to houses. There on the left there, that's Heritage. That one gets pretty large, 40 to 80 feet tall, up to 50 feet wide. So that's a full-size selection there. And that's one that you would definitely want to put way out away from the house. These are not real good with ice storms. You'll lose a lot of branches on those, but I have noticed that they bounce back really easily from that. So sometimes they look like they won't recover, and over the years I've noticed that a lot of them recover quite nicely, and you wouldn't even notice that they had lost maybe 60% of their branches. There on the right there, if you want a river birch and you want in your landscape, if you want something to get huge, that's Tecumseh Compact. It only gets 10 to 12 feet tall and wide, so that's the variety that you would want to put closer to your house and your landscape, and you'll still get that exfoliating bark. One thing about these, they are a plant that does like a wetter location. They do quite fine in droughts, though. They do drop a lot of leaves early if that happens. Don't worry about that. That's totally normal. That's just in response to not having enough water. It'll drop some of its leaf load. Another one of those selections that I told you that you probably wouldn't want to put in a landscape, and I probably wouldn't want you to either, just because of the mess that these plants actually produce. But this is another one of those plants that I really like. I like the spring bloom on it. I like the smell of it, and I think it's just an interesting plant, even with the little cigar hanging on it there. You can see on the right, or the seed pods. But this is catalpa. There's a northern selection and a southern. As far as I know, there's not an actual cultivar, so these are just the straight wild types of catalpas. Catalpa is native to our area, believe it or not, but we have a northern catalpa there. That's on the right. It grows about 40 to 60 feet tall and 20 to 40 feet wide. That's a much larger plant than the southern catalpa, which the picture of the blooms there in the middle is the southern catalpa. It only grows 30 to 40 feet tall and wide, which is still a pretty good sized tree. And then all of the catalpas, once they bloom, will produce, you can see those long pods on it. Sometimes this is called cigar tree. And you can see why with those bean pod looking structures there on the right. For me, I think the northern catalpa is a prettier tree than the southern because it has a more I don't know, a larger bloom than the southern does, and it's just a taller, nicer, larger tree, which I just think it's a prettier plant than the southern catalpa. Another thing that happens to this plant periodically is there's a worm called a catalpa worm that can actually defoliate. Matter of fact, I've noticed one on my way to work that was defoliated within just a few days from the catalpa worm. The cigars are still hanging on the tree, but there's no leaves. And you don't worry about that. Usually that's one round of that periodically, maybe once or twice in 10 years is going to happen to these trees and they bounce back. They've got a relationship with that catalpa worm, I guess, and they've evolved together. So neither one has died out from having that infestation. But one thing about the catalpa worm is it's a really good fishing bait. So if you like to fish and you know somebody that has catalpa, ask them to let you know if they have an outbreak of catalpa worm because the fish go crazy for those worms. Here's Atlas cedar. This is a true cedar, unlike what we call a cedar tree around here, which is actually a juniper. This again is a true cedar. It's tolerant to most soils. As long as it's not wet, it does not want to be in a wet location. It will grow in sun to partial shade, but definitely prefers full sun. There's several varieties of these out on the market as well, but this is probably the most common type is glauca. There on the left is upright form. It grows about 40 to 60 feet tall and about 30 to 40 feet wide. And then on the right there is glauca pendula. That picture there, that plant is pretty old. That's a pretty old plant. As you can tell, it is a weeping form, but they have it staked, as you can see there if you look closely, to keep some of those branches from going all the way to the ground, which does help, cut back on some problems that would have if that plant grow on the ground. It also makes a nice place for people to walk under, and you can see that they did cut out a little place there for the path for people to walk through. But that one will get about 15 to 20 feet tall and wide. Given 100 years, you can get that picture. You can have what's in that picture there. That's in a botanic garden. Katsura is probably not a tree you've heard of, or many of you have, but it prefers full sun and moist, rich soil. Especially the first few years, it needs to be babied a little bit to make sure it gets off to a good start. It's not drought tolerant. Definitely those first few years. The straight cultivar grows about 40 to 60 feet high and about 20 to 30 feet wide. Um, Heron's Wood Globe is a dwarf. It gets about 15 feet tall and wide. It's a nice little dwarf tree. Raspberry yellow has summer leaves with a hint of pink, as you can see in the picture there. Actually, the bottom left is the raspberry yellow. That's the hint in the pink. The Heronswood Globe is the one with showing the fall color on the right. Upper right, the straight cultivar there is the first picture on the top left. And then we have Pendula, which is the weeping form. It grows up to about 25 feet. And then it weeps back down to the ground. The great thing about Katsura is once the leaves turn color, they drop to the ground and dry, they actually emit an aroma that smells like toasted marshmallow. The first time I found this tree, I was at a botanic garden. I think it was in St. Louis, St. Louis Botanic Garden, and it was October, and the leaves had fallen and they were drying, and it was just a terrific aroma coming from those leaves when they were dry. So if you're looking for something a little different, this is a great tree for that. Just know that you're going to have to baby it for the first couple of years, but after that, it'll take off and be just fine. I don't think anyone's favorite tree list would not have a red bud in it, and certainly nor does mine. Red buds prefer full sun to light shade. They are adaptable to most soil types. And if you've noticed going to Lexington up Bluegrass Parkway, you can see usually that red buds will grow just about anywhere if given a chance. The top left there, that is forest pansy. It has the purple leaves in the summertime. It still has the great pink flowers in the spring. And then we have a new variety that I just absolutely think is gorgeous. Is flamethrower. That's the top right there. And you can see the orange and red tinted leaves. The new leaves come out that red color, and then they fade to that more of a chartreuse color. And then we have bottom right there. That's a selection called Appalachian Red, which is has a darker red buds and still have the neon pink flowers, but it is a lot darker than our straight cultivars usually are as far as blooms go. It grows, and all these are good about 25 feet tall and wide if they're in the right location and given the room and everything that they need to grow. In the bottom left there, I just wanted to make sure people realize fall color is a big deal for a lot of people, and you can get some really nice fall color with redbud. But that actually, the bottom left there is the fall color of the forest pansy. That's the purple one there at the top. So that's the leaf color in the summer there, that purple color, and then you can see that gorgeous fall color there at the bottom left that tree gives you in the fall as well. So this tree has multiple seasons of interest, which is great. And with the new leaf shades, it's even getting better. This is a plant that's native to Kentucky that you're probably not familiar with. This is a yellowwood. It is likes a limey soil, which is just fine for our area. It's pH tolerant as well. The straight cultivar grows about 30 to 50 feet tall and wide with white flowers and a yellow fall color. And you can see the fall flowering or the fall color there in the top picture. And then on the right there, that is the in full bloom. You can see those long branches of flowers there, and there's a little pea type flower. There is one cultivar. It's probably going to be really hard to find if anybody's looking for it. It's called Perkins Pink, and you can see there that the flowers are just a little bit of a light pink color there. Dogwood, like redbud, is probably on just about everyone's favorite tree list. Coosa dogwood is from China, and a lot of people really like that one, but I still like the old-fashioned native dogwood, which is actually Cornus florida. It prefers moist, well-drained, slightly acidic soil and partial to full sun. If you ever see this in the wild, you'll see that usually it's in partial sun, not necessarily full sun. It does flower more heavily in a fully sun area, but the trees usually are healthier and grow better if given a little bit of afternoon shade. There are a lot of cultivars out there of our native dogwood, literally hundreds, but these are just a few of the better ones. On the top left there, that's Cloud 9. It grows about 25 feet tall and wide. That's a big dogwood, but if you know dogwoods, it will take them a very long time to get that size, and they have to be very happy to get to that size. This one has large white flowers, which is also, and it's also good for our hot, humid summers. And if you look at the flowers closely, that the petals do overlap, so you get a larger flower and a lot more color to this plant. There in the middle, that's Cherokee Chief. It has a large ruby red flowers and has reddish new growth. Most of the dogwoods are, none of them are really red. They're all going to be pink. This is a really dark pink though. And then on the right there we have Cherokee Brave. This one's really beautiful in full bloom. It has a two-toned flower, which is pink and white together. It's a very nice a variety. There are a lot of a whole series of the Cherokee dogwoods out there. A lot of different flower shapes and colors out there with these. The American beech is a large tree. You can see it has beautiful bark on it there in the top left picture. It'll grow usually about 50 to 70 feet tall and wide. Does prefer full sun and moist acidic soil. Does not want to be wet, but given a little extra moisture, it is going to be a really happy tree and going to grow a little faster for you. Straight cultivar, there are no cultivars on the market as I know of. All of these are just selections from the wild that are unnamed, but they can grow up to 120 feet tall if they're very happy in a very good location. Now, most of us, well, nobody within earshot of this video in the next few years, if they're planting a small tree, is going to see a 120 feet tall tree, but maybe their grandkids or great grandkids might. It does produce small little nuts, as you can see on the top right there, little beech nuts, and the squirrels and chipmunks and things will eat those. This is a great shade tree. It just is doesn't have the variety and the beauty maybe of the European beech, which we're going to talk about in just a second. So here's the European beech. It'll grow about 50 to 60 feet tall and about 35 to 45 feet wide. It has similar soil requirements as the American beech, but maybe a little more tolerant to poorer soils and pH. There are literally hundreds of varieties of the European beech out there. They've been selected and cultivated and to make some really beautiful trees. The first one there on the top left is red obelisk. It grows about 10 to 12 feet high and 3 feet wide in about 12 years, but it can grow up to 50 feet tall, but it is going to stay very narrow. This is a good street tree. If you don't want it to get really wide, and it's developed for that. And then we have there in the middle, we have pendula. And then this one is a weeping form, but no two trees are going to ever look alike. They grow in their own way. They do weep though. It's a gorgeous tree. And in the top right there is Purpurea, which is also called copper beech. That's one of my favorite trees of all time. It's absolutely gorgeous. And you can see it does have that beech shape similar to our native beech, but you have that copper foliage to go with it. And then there at the bottom is Purpurea tricolor, which is a selection of copper beech, but it does have purplish leaves that are striped and edged with the rose there on the edges of it. But there are a lot of cultivars out there of the European beech. It's a magnificent tree. Here we have a ginkgo. It's about 50 to 80 feet tall. It does have variable spread based on varieties. The species can go over 100 feet tall. It is tolerant to most soils. The ginkgo is also considered a living fossil. It's in the fossil record back 150 million years. It's the last of its kind. It has really no insect or disease problems because of that. And it is the only plant that has that fan leaf shape there, if you can see in the picture. There are a lot of different shapes and sizes of these and a lot of cultivars out, but on the top left there, that's autumn gold. That is an all-male cultivar. It is symmetrical, 50 feet tall, but 30 feet wide. Do make sure that you plant an all-male variety because you do not want the fruit there that you see on the top right. The fruit, when they fall, they decompose and they smell really, really bad. So make sure that you select a cultivar from a reputable nursery. You don't want to plant a tree like this and then find out 15 years later that you have a female and you're going to have to deal with that stinky fruit each year after that. There in the middle is Fastigiata that grows 30 to 50 feet tall, but only gets 15 feet wide. Another more of those conical shaped trees that are good for cities. And then there's numerous other varieties out there. There's some vase shaped ones, a lot of different forms out there. Again, though, avoid the unnamed cultivars because you run a 50-50 shot of getting a female. And if you get a female, you're not going to be happy. I can promise you that. Honey locust is one of those trees that was very popular in the 50s. It's fell out of favor for a lot of reasons lately. I still think it's a good shade tree and it's good for our area. It does grow in full sun and will grow in most soil types. Our native honey locust actually has very long thorns on it, but these cultivars do not. The top left there, that shade master, or the top right, I'm sorry, a shade master. That's probably the one that's most popular. It grows about 45 feet tall and about 35 feet wide. It is almost podless, which is a good thing to have too, because the pods are messy and we don't necessarily want any seedlings around. The great thing about honey locust is you don't really have to worry about raking the leaves. They're really small, and when you mow over them, they pretty much disappear, and you won't have to worry about it killing your grass if you don't rake. On the top left there is ruby lace. It has the purple foliage, which looks pretty nice in that picture. I know there's some publications will say that it has a horrible shape, but I think that one in that picture looks pretty nice. And it'll grow 30 feet by 25 feet, so it's not a huge tree, but it will give you some good shade. Kentucky coffee tree. It's our state heritage tree. It prefers deep, rich, moist soil. That's going to be for best growth, and it's going to prefer full sun. Kentucky coffee tree takes a few years really to get a good shape on it. It usually goes straight up and kind of looks, I don't know, not real nice for several years. But once, if you get 7, 8, 10 years in, it starts to fill out and get some of the shape that you're really looking for in some of these trees. The straight cultivar grows about 60 to 75 feet tall and 50 feet wide, so it's a very large tree. In the pictures here, Espresso is on the top left. If you look at it, it does have upward arching branches. It kind of reminds you of an elm in shape. And it'll grow about 50 feet by 30 feet, so it's a pretty big tree. And there on the right there, that's Prairie Titan. It is an upright spreading branches. It has upright spreading branches, I'm sorry. And it'll grow up to 70 feet by 40 feet. So it's a really large tree. And these will have the large pods of little Kentucky coffee beans inside of it. So just be sure wherever you plant this that you're willing to deal with that mess or that litter that might come from that tree. These are great trees, not really that many insect or disease problems, and they'll give you really good shade. I like hollies. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of hollies, but a couple hollies here. The American holly is our native holly. It grows in full sun and does prefer acidic, moist, well-draining soils. So be sure you do a soil test before you plant some of these hollies. Then on the top left, that's Jersey Knight. That is a male variety. Remember, you will need a male variety to go with a female variety to get the berries, which is what most of us are looking for. The Jersey Knight there grows about 15 to 30 feet tall and wide. And then there in the middle is a Jersey Princess, which is the female variety with the Jersey. It does have the dark green leaves and clusters of red berries, and you can see there the male cultivar has no comparison in the beauty of the female cultivar with the red berries. But you can see there's a lot of berries on this tree. And then on the right there, that's called Ode Heavy Berry. I just like the name of it. All these, most all the American hollies are going to be good cultivars, but Old Heavy Berry is an old variety, and it's still a good variety. It is vigorous. It does have dark green leaves with heavy crops of berries and excellent winter hardiness. Now, you could plant a Jersey Knight male and plant an Old Heavy Berry, and it would pollinate the Old Heavy Berry, and you would still get berries. So you don't necessarily have to have the male counterpart to each of the female cultivars. You can have one male cultivar of American holly, and it will pollinate multiple female cultivars at the same time. Sweet gum. A lot of people don't like sweet gum because they think of it as being a messy tree, and it can be. That's why if you're going to plant a cultivar that actually does have the gum balls, be sure you put it out away from the house or away from places that you would not want those gum balls. These grow in moist, wet, slightly acidic locations. It also wants full sun. And there's a numerous cultivars of these out on the market now as well, including cultivars that are gumball-less. First there on the left, that's Slender Silhouette. It was found, believe it or not, growing next to a railroad track, and the cultivar made it to on the market because it grows 60 feet tall and only 3 feet wide. So it's a very cylindrical tree. It's good for areas that you don't have a lot of space, and if you really like the sweet gum, you can plant that sweet gum there. It also gives you some architectural shape if you need it in the area, especially if you plant multiple ones of these. I know they have some of this, I don't know if it's this variety, but they have some of those slender ones planted down at Maker's Mark, and we have some here, one or two in our landscape here at the office. There in the middle, that's Rotunda loba. It grows 75 feet tall and 40 feet wide. and is fruitless. That is a big key. That was one of the first ones on the market. And you can look there, the leaf is a little bit different. It's more rounded on the ends compared to a lot of the other varieties. But I will note that there's been some um, occasions where it will revert back to that leaf, that pointy leaf shape. So if you like that fig leaf look, it may not stay. Personally, I like the regular sharp pointy leaf better, but just letting you know that it could happen. It could revert. And then we have Aurora, which is on the top right. That it grows about 30 feet tall and 20 feet wide. And it does have that nice variegated foliage, as you can see there, that kind of chartreuse and green mix there. And then the straight cultivar, if you just wanted to go find one in a fence row somewhere and bring it home, it will grow 60 to 75 feet tall and maybe 2/3 as wide as tall. I will say, if you've noticed some of the wild cultivars or the wild varieties growing out in fence rows and things, there's a multitude of fall color on these. I have seen like maybe 6 different colors on the same plant, almost even like a dark purple, almost black, red, purple, pink, yellow, all on the same plant. So there's a lot of variation in fall colors on these, and it can vary from year to year, and it has a really nice, attractive bark on it as well. Here we have Tulip Popular. This is our actual state tree. It prefers moist, deep loam soil and pH. It is pH adaptable, but probably prefers slightly acidic soils. This is a great tree. It's great for pollinators, as you can see there on the right there, those tulip flowers there. The bumblebees absolutely love this plant when it's in full bloom. The honeybees do as well. The straight cultivar is considered our tallest tree usually in our woodlands. It will grow 70 to 90 feet tall very easily, about 30 to 50 feet wide. So it's a huge tree. As far as varieties, on the top left there, that's Ario marginatum. It grows about 70 to 80 feet tall and 30 to 50 feet wide, but it does have the variegated leaves. As you can see there, it's a very attractive plant. And the leaf of these, I think, is kind of interesting on the tulip poplar as well. But if you live in town and you need a smaller tree and you want to plant a tulip poplar, there's one called a Little Volunteer, which is considered a dwarf form. And it is a dwarf form, but still grows 30 feet tall and 20 feet wide. So it still makes a nice sized tree, but it is a lot smaller than our straight cultivars are from the wild. So if you don't have as much room for a full size one, you can still get a tulip poplar that might not get quite as large. We have Southern Magnolias. I love Southern Magnolias. We've been kind of on the borderline for a long time on hardiness for some of these, even though we've got some growing in different areas of Springfield and Lebanon, for that matter, that are quite old, maybe probably 50 to 100 years old, 30 to 40 foot tall. But sometimes we do have some winter burn on these, as they are broadleaf evergreens, but they do prefer full sun, acidic, moist, well-drained soil. The straight cultivar, the wild types, will get 60 to 80 feet tall and 30 to 50 feet wide, which is quite large. I've not seen any in our area quite that big, but 30 feet is probably as tall as I've seen. But that doesn't mean that they won't go taller than that. And as we're having a warming climate and not as severe winters anymore, we're being able to grow a lot more of these now than we used to. On the top left there, that's a little gem. It is considered dwarf, but it does mature at 20 feet tall and 10 feet wide. The great thing about some of these are they will bloom a lot earlier, especially the dwarf varieties, and some of the grafted ones, they'll bloom as a smaller plant. Now in the middle is D.D. Blanchard. That's a pyramidal growth shape there, which most of these have, especially early on. And it'll grow to 50 feet, and it does have dark green leaves and an orangish undersides of the leaves, as you can see in the picture there. And all these have these nice, large, white magnolia blossoms with the nice, sweet smell. And then on the top right, that's probably the most commonly grown in our area, that's Bracken's Brown. It is considered the hardiness of the magnolias, and it will grow about 30 to 50 feet tall and 15 to 30 feet wide. And if you look, it does have dark green leaves, but it has a rusty underside. If you look closely at the pictures, you can see it has a lot more of that fuzz underneath the bottom of the leaf and on the stems, and it's believed that it's helped some of the hardiness for this plant. It's probably a zone hardier than the other cultivars, which most of the cultivars are 6, 7-ish hardiness, and we're at 6 feet here. But Bracken's Brown is in zone, it can go to zone 5. So A lot of the older varieties may be something like Bracken's Brown, or maybe just a wild selection that's similar to them, but that someone sold years ago. Don Redwood is another one of those living fossil trees. It's been around since the dinosaurs. It is a beautiful tree. It grows best in full sun with moist, well-drained, slightly acidic soils. It is a beautiful tree there. If you can see in the top left there, the bark, and it grows more of a, especially early on, into like a V shape, which you can see as it gets larger. It loses some of those lower limbs, but it's an absolutely gorgeous plant. The straight cultivar grows 70 to 100 feet tall and about 25 feet wide. So it grows more tall than wide. It's pretty much straight up early on. And then in the middle, there's Nitschke's cream, which is a variegated type. And you can't really tell that closely in the picture, but it almost looks like it's just kind of a little bit chlorotic, but it is supposed to be that way. It'll get about 60 to 80 feet tall. And then on the right there, we have Sheridan Spire, which is a smaller cultivar. It is more of an upright species, or than the regular species. It grows about 50 feet, about 15 feet. If you want to see some of these in our area that are close to mature, Bernheim does have some of these planted around a couple of their lakes or ponds over there. And usually on their plant sale, sometimes they'll sell a few plants that they've started from seed off of some of these. It's a really nice plant. It's a pretty plant. I think most of us should, if we've got room, should probably put some of these out. Black gum is another one of those nice natives that we have that has a nice fall color. Um, it does produce a tiny little fruit. It's not really a messy fruit. So just put that out there. This is sometimes also called Tupelo. Um, so just keep that in mind. It does prefer moist, well-drained, acidic, deep soils and full sun. If you give this rich soil with some water, it'll grow pretty quickly. The straight cultivar grows about 30 to 50 feet tall and about 20 to 30 feet wide. As far as cultivars go, they're on the top left. That is wildfire. The new shoots are reddish there in the next picture. You can see it there. And it grows about 30 to 50 feet tall and 20 feet wide. So it gives you some red color while it's growing, and then it gives you fabulous deep red color in the fall as well. And then on the middle right there, there's Zydeco twist. And if you look closely at the branches, you can see they are twisted. They contort, kind of like a contorted filbert. And that one will grow 30 to 40 feet tall. It's not quite as big just because of the twist in the branches. And then on the right there, if you want something a little smaller or cascading, there's Autumn Cascades, which is it's a semi-weeping form, and it grows about 30 to 40 feet tall and wide. But any of the varieties out there on the market today are gorgeous. Usually you're going to get a red fall color, but sometimes you can see you may get a yellowish or an orange too. But it is a fabulous tree. Very little insect problems or disease problems on these as well. Here I put these together because they are similar, but sycamore and London plane tree, they do prefer full sun and deep moist soil, especially they especially love banks of rivers and streams and lakes. They do like a little extra water, but they grow quite fine in an area that maybe is not next to water. But the top left there, you can see that is our American sycamore. It's a straight cultivar. That is the fall or the winter uh, trunk and branches, and you can see how gorgeous it is. Winter is the time that these trees really show off. The straight cultivar grows 75 to 100 feet and 50 feet wide, so it's a large tree. And then we have the London plane tree, which actually is a cross between our native American sycamore and the Oriental sycamore, which is from Asia. So the London plane tree was hybridized and planted in Europe. And you can see there in the middle, it's a nice tree. That's blood good. It grows about 50 feet, about 25 feet. So it's quite a bit smaller, but still a large tree, but quite a bit smaller than our straight cultivar of American sycamore. And then on the top right, there we have Columbia, which gets about 50 to 60 feet tall and 30 feet wide. And all of these still have that same bark, similar to our native sycamore. One thing about the London plane tree is it is a little bit smaller, but also it's a little more resistant to anthracnose. And if you notice sometimes in the early spring, whenever sycamores are first coming out, you notice they're slowly leaf out. That's because a lot of times the anthracnose is attacking those new buds and they die, and we have to have new buds that grow back after the weather straightens up and warms up and we don't have as much disease problem. That's a lot of times why you'll see larger trees that look a little bit gnarled on the ends of the branches. That's because they're having to regrow new shoots multiple times in one season. And here we have white oak, probably not necessarily something that we consider as a tree for our yards or landscape, but it is a gorgeous plant. It's one of our toughest oaks we have. It's way tougher than a pin oak, but it does prefer full sun and acidic, deep, moist soils to grow the best. And we also have a swamp white oak, which is pretty much very similar to the white oak, except it does prefer a much wetter area, or it can live in a much wetter area. And if you look there, you can see the leaves. That's to give you a comparison. Top left there, that's the straight white oak. And then on the top right, that's the swamp white oak. And if you've got two together and you're not sure if sometimes the plants can cross, even naturally, they can hybridize themselves. If you're really wanting to know if it's a white oak or a swamp white oak, maybe the leaves sometimes look similar. The swamp white oak is going to have a little fuzz on the underside of the leaf, and the white oak is going to be smooth. And as you know, for our area and for the bourbon industry, whiskey or bourbon barrels are made out of white oak. So um, it is a nice tree. It'll take about 90 to 100 years to get a tree that looks anything like the one on the left, upper left, but it is a gorgeous plant. It's one that you could plant, and it'll be here for your grandkids to see. But white oak straight cultivar grows about 50 to 80 feet tall and about 40 feet wide. So it's a large tree. And then the swamp white oak is pretty much the same, maybe not quite as tall, only 50 to 60 feet tall and about 30 feet wide. So it's a little smaller, but very similar trees, and they're both gorgeous. Even the winter silhouette, I think, of the white oak is just absolutely gorgeous. Well, I guess I can open it up for questions. People can call, or they can even put it on Facebook or Messenger or whatever about any of these trees. I'm sure I could have added several more to this list. These are just a few of my favorite trees. Not always trees that everybody would want to necessarily plant, but if you're a plant person like me, you like just about everything. But I could absolutely have put a few more on there. But at 46, 47 minutes. That's a long time for people to listen about trees. But if anyone has any questions, they can always call me at the Washington County Extension Office at 859-336-7741. Happy gardening.